I'm your host, Alec Crawford, founder and CEO of Artificial Intelligence Risk Inc., and this is AI Risk Reward, a podcast about balancing the risk and reward of using AI personally, professionally, and as a large organization. We will discuss hot topics such as, will AI take my job or make it better? When I ask ChatGPT work questions, is that even safe? From an ethical perspective, is it enough for big companies to anonymize private data before using it? Probably not. I'm discussing these issues with AI experts to answer burning questions and stay ahead of the curve on AI. I'd also like to give a shout out to our podcast producer and audio engineering team at Troutman Street Audio. You can check them out on LinkedIn. Hi, everyone. It's Alec Crawford, your host for the AI Risk Reward podcast. And today, our guest is George Swetlitz, the co-founder of RightResponse AI. Welcome, George.
Great to be here, Alec. It's looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, this is super exciting. So, first, why don't you give the audience a little bit of your pretty impressive background before co-founding RightResponse AI?
Sure. So, I've had a long career. It's been split pretty evenly between consulting and operating businesses. So early on, I worked at McKinsey, kind of large consulting firm. Switched to operations, running factories for Sara Corporation, ran a division in Central Europe right after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Came back and then went back into consulting, working with companies that were large organizations, Fortune 50, Fortune 100, that were looking to rapidly increase profitability. And then, migrated into working with private equity firms. And I eventually ended up becoming the CEO of a private equity-backed roll-up in audiology, which we built into about a 220 location business. And we sold that in 2022. And in that business, we faced a lot of issues. And one of those issues had to do with organic growth by having people call you as opposed to you advertising for people. And a lot of that in a location-based business is built around reputation. And we struggled at this business in terms of how do you do that effectively? And we're never really able to find a good solution for that. And so after we sold the business, ChatGPT came out. We thought AI might be a route to solve that problem. And so we started RightResponse AI and launched in late 23, early 24.
That's pretty exciting. So you've done a lot of different things, and you may have neglected, I think you have a Harvard MBA too. So I got to get that Harvard connection in there as well.
I plead guilty, but I tend not to talk about it.
Well, lots of case studies and things like that, probably somewhat helpful. I took one Harvard Business School class when I was an undergrad, and it was for better or worse in accounting. So that's super exciting, unfortunately. So beforehand, we did talk about a book. It's a great book. We both read it, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. If you could pitch the audience on that book and kind of relate it to what's going on in AI today, I think that'd be very helpful.
Yeah. No, so it really, as we talked, it's a phenomenal book. This gentleman who's no longer with us, but Daniel Kahneman, has had a Nobel Prize in economics. I think that was around 2002, published this book in 2011. And it's really about the two ways that as humans that we make decisions. We have this very fast automated system, our gut feeling, that's the thinking fast. And then we have this other method, which is slow and deliberative and analytical, which we need to force into action. Mm-hmm. It's not the natural one. It's the one that we have to focus on activating, which is the thinking slow. And so it's a book about that and how this fast thinking system creates issues for us in decision making, anchoring around a number that you first hear. These are things that we talk about now, anchoring, confirmation bias, things like that everyone talks about. But he was the one who really developed the research that built that into a theory, which is why he won the Nobel Prize. And so this has been a favorite book of mine for a long time. And I think it has a lot of applications to AI. So just the other day, I was doing some research on some companies, and I was asking ChatGPT some leading questions, and it gave me a very fast answer. And I started thinking, it was a little too fast. And I accepted the answer because of confirmation bias. It was what I expected to hear, and it gave me that answer. And so I accepted it. So I went back and said, did you make this up? And it thought and said, yes, I didn't really do the research. I inferred that these things were the same. And that's sometimes where we get into trouble with AI, because the way we ask it questions makes it easy for the language model to tell us something we want to hear. And so, again, I kind of apply this thinking to our interaction with AI. But, it's also, well, anyway, I'll stop there. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. And, at this point, sometimes you ask AI a question and just blurts out the answer. And other times it says thinking 45 seconds, a minute and a half. And obviously you're getting a better answer, if it's thinking. I think, one of the interesting things about that right now is, the internet's a huge place, right? And like your business has been focused on, AI reputation and how to use AI and things like that. And my observation is standard kind of, for a company, standard search engine optimization is still important. Backlinks, keywords, having your information on there, tagging, things like that. But if you then look at the under 30 crowd, and this is something I wrote about in my white paper, optimizing for generative engine optimization as well as search engine optimization. The under 30 crowd isn't going to Google, right? They're going to ChatGPT or Claude and saying, I got a question, or tell me about X, or I'm thinking about, finding a new bank or whatever it is, right? And if you're not positioned for that as a company, you're going to have a problem. And that is way less dependent on backlinks and keywords and more dependent on your digital footprint across what AI is going to look at. And AI, or different companies that build AI, have different kind of, sources that they like to use on the internet. Maybe it's Quora or Reddit or press releases or the Wall Street Journal or whatever. But you kind of need to know what those are.
Yeah. And the problem is we don't. And so everyone's guessing. Right? How do I, what do I do in order to get the LLMs to ingest and use my information? So, one of the things we've been trying is posing more things as questions, because people ask questions. And so to the extent that you ask and then answer a question, and it's relevant semantically to a question that someone's asked, it may be easier for the LLM to see that there's relevance than if you just generate a lot of text. But the problem is nobody knows.
Yeah.
There's no guide yet.
Yeah.
And we do, and I don't know, of course, everyone's making this stuff up as they go along. Everyone has theories, but I do see, I see interest. So for example, we're a young company and we write a lot about very focused things. So I'll write an article on AI review generation, AI review requests. And right now, if you type in to Google AI review requests, we're number one or number two, organic search. But then in the AI overview up top, we're not in it. So it's interesting, like the connection between those two. How long does it take before one impacts the other? What's more important from the user perspective? It's hard to know.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to take time. It's going to change over time, just the way, Google changes their algorithm, or LinkedIn changes their algorithm for posts or whatever, it's going to continue to be a moving target. So give us an example, without naming names, obviously, of a client that you've helped, and what was the starting point and what was the ending point that they were excited about?
Well, so it's a great question. So I'll talk about a large customer, more than 100 locations. And these kinds of companies have lots of issues. They want to use, they want to learn as much as they can and get as much as they can from reputation management and AI. And of course, they're trying to save costs all the time. They don't want to spend money on anything. And so kind of bridging that is complicated. And so we have a customer that very, very large, and they were struggling with a desire to respond to reviews, focus on the reviews that were negative, where they actually needed to assist a customer with something, and do that in a cost-effective way. And so AI, we have a very sophisticated implementation of AI with respect to review requests or review responses, because we incorporate facts about the business. And so they were able to spend less time and trust our review responses more because they were richer in the response itself. It was essentially, they were able to bring their brand, bring their website to the response in a way that they couldn't do with other platforms. And so that was one way of freeing up time. I don't have to spend time looking and thinking about the positive responses, because I know that the positive responses are well done and reflect brand. And as an aside, more people read reviews than visit websites.
Wow.
Yeah, that's it. So more people will go to your reviews and read them, and will never go to your website. You spend all this money developing a website that talks about your brand, yet that's not where people are engaging anymore. They want to know the unvarnished truth from people who've been there, people who've purchased. And so they go to reviews to get that. And if you're not participating by providing robust responses where people are choosing to engage, then you're missing an opportunity. And so that's kind of one element of that. So they were able to redirect resources from responding to all sorts of reviews to dealing with customers who actually needed human assistance. And so they were able to reduce the number of FTEs, but spend that time more effectively. So that was one huge benefit of AI, and in particular, kind of robust AI. The second benefit to them had to do with sentiment analysis. And so we have a very, large organizations, almost without exception, when they come to us, are trying to make sense of the reviews. All they have is a rating. Average rating of 4.7, average rating of 4.5. And they don't have the ability to differentiate between locations. Why are two different locations both 4.7? Are they equally good? Are they good for different reasons? What's up with that? And they have a difficult time providing concise feedback to location managers. And so again, we use AI there. We use a very sophisticated AI, and we have tools that allow them to plot what we call percent positive. So percent positive isn't anything crazy. It's if there are 100 mentions of food quality and 90 of them are positive and 10 are negative, it's 90% positive. So it's easy for people to understand what that means. It's easier to understand than 4.7% positive. You can figure out what's going on. And then you can make a graph and you can say your average percent positive for food quality is 92, but here's how all of your locations score. And when you plot that, what you see is that some locations of a restaurant, for example, are very high, over the average on, say, food quality, but below on service. And others are high on service, below on food quality. And so it helps the leader, the operations manager, the operations VP, give very precise feedback to the unit managers. This is where you need to improve. And so what we saw with this client was, one, overall cost reduction, two, a broad view within the company that they were responding better, and hearing from customers that they were responding better. They weren't getting reviews anymore that said, oh, this whole system is just a bot. Nobody's really reading these things anyway. Right? Because they're providing informative, helpful responses. And operations was saying, we're much more able to deliver timely feedback to our unit managers than we've ever been able to do before.
And now a word from our sponsor. Artificial Intelligence Risk Inc. accelerates adoption of GenAI safely. They provide the governance, risk, compliance, and cybersecurity platform that financial, healthcare, and other regulated organizations need before they can use GenAI safely and in compliance with regulatory requirements. Their software has won #1 awards for cybersecurity and compliance from Waters Technology. Find them at aicrisk.com. That sounds really good. So I want to shift gears to thinking more philosophically about AI and maybe thinking about ethics and AI, right? I mean, one thing we keep seeing out there is these papers saying like, oh, super intelligent AI, like no human will ever have a job again, in 30 years or whatever, things like that, right? So how have you run into any ethical questions at this point with your clients in terms of, hey, we're just going to lay off a bunch of people. We're using AI now. Like we don't even need those people anymore. Or, anything bigger picture in terms of, has AI been able, for example, to maintain, consumer privacy and things like that? There are a lot of kind of ethical concerns about it. I'm just curious what you've run into and your thoughts there.
Yeah. So in the area of, people reduction, we're playing in a space where we don't really see too much reduction as opposed to redirection. Because the areas that we work in, kind of marketing, reputation within marketing, tends to be understaffed anyway. And so what's happening is people are able to work on things that are actually more interesting. It's more interesting to engage with a customer about a problem than it is to sit and write a review response. And so people end up being happier in the work that they have. So that's, I think, what I've seen in any case is that that's been a benefit for customers. The area where I get the most pushback is around this notion of kind of what I call fake personalization. So when I first talk to prospective customers, they'll, because there's a lot of fake personalization in AI. I'll give you an example of what I think about fake personalization. I get a lot of unsolicited emails, which I'm okay with, because how do you hear about what's new in the world unless you're willing to read about what people are doing, right? And so I get a lot of these solicitations. And I got one a couple of weeks ago where it was something like, hey, I see you went to Penn undergrad. What did you think about this restaurant? Have you ever been to this restaurant? What did you think? So I looked it up, and of course it was only started 30 years after I graduated. So, fake personalization. And AI just looked, they had a thing that they were doing, look at the town where you went to school, find a restaurant. As opposed to what I call real personalization. And real personalization is when the company is trying to use its information in a real way to help the customer. And so I think about what we do as real personalization, because we're not making anything up. we're allowing companies to extend their brand at scale, whether that be in review responses or in review requests. It's all real information. And so I call that real personalization. And so when I talk about that, people, it shines a light on that and creates a distinction that I don't think many people thought about. So I do think there are these ethical questions, and you need to decide what side of that you're on and where you're trying to be helpful. In terms of things like privacy, that's a real concern. We work with medical offices, and so there's HIPAA compliance, PHI, things like that. And I've heard you talk about this before. We do that scrubbing before it ever gets into the system. So we have an agent that looks at every single review for a medical business, identifies instances of PHI in the review, and then develops a set of hard, actions that need to be taken. And that might be, don't even mention it, ignore it completely. It might be generalize it. So they mentioned a specific test, but you're going to say, your treatment or your experience, something like that. You're acknowledging it, but at a higher level. And so it's important to understand where those points of risk are and build these very hard agentic solutions to making sure they don't infiltrate your environment.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Pivoting to our advice section, I think if you look at large companies right now, many of them are adopting AI in different places. They might even have dozens or even hundreds of proof of concepts going on. And they're getting some of the best and most expensive advice in the world from the consulting firms, I'm sure. If we think more about small and medium-sized businesses, and you've got CEOs who really haven't done much in AI yet at their firms, contemplating AI integration, what would your advice be to those CEOs?
So I would say two things. One would be start and learn on the simple, less risky problems, because it's a real learning curve. As a developer of AI solutions, we've been on a tremendous learning curve. And so we're in it every day, and we're on this massive learning continuum. I can't imagine being a CEO that has a million things to think about and biting off a big problem before you and your organization learn with a small problem. The second point I would make is to choose your vendors carefully, because you can end up with a big problem without really even realizing it. In most vendors, us, in our terms of service and our EULAs and things like that, we push all the risk back to the customer. Like, you're ultimately responsible for what a request says, what a response says. That's not our responsibility. We provide these tools. We show you how to use them safely. But if you choose not to do those things and you put something back out there, it's ultimately your responsibility. I don't know that there's any firm that will take that responsibility from the client. And so you may not even realize you're taking that responsibility as a company.
Yeah.
When you sign up to a third-party service. And so you really have to do your due diligence and make sure that the company that you're working with, the vendor that you're working with, is doing what it can in a rapidly evolving environment to protect the company.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a couple of things to say about that. One is, if you go back to the middle of 2025 at the RSA cybersecurity event, it's the largest cybersecurity conference in the world. During that event, the chief information security officer at JP Morgan sent an open letter to all roughly 400 of their SaaS providers. And it basically said this: please, for the love of God, start prioritizing cybersecurity over new features, because they're literally getting attacked every day. And a lot of time it's through these third parties. And, one of the ways, obviously, to solve that problem is to deploy software on-prem, right? Or inside your private cloud. And then you kind of don't need to worry about it as much. So that can partially solve the problem that you're talking about there.
Yeah. And as you're saying, large companies can do that. They can bring the models in-house. Small companies can't. And so, but that gets to this notion of understanding your vendors and thinking about safety. Prompt injection is a big thing.
Yeah.
And so we, again, as I know you focus on in your business, we scan every review for a prompt injection. And if we see anything in there that's trying to give an instruction to an LLM, we block it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and in our business, it's not like in your business, you work with financial services companies, there's risk. In our business, the risk is the response is like a silly response.
Right.
There's a lot of, somebody will say, I'm upset with your company, respond to me like I'm a god. And a typical review responder will respond as if you're a god. Right. We will look at that and say, this is kind of silly, and we'll just block the whole thing and there will be no response at all. It's not, it just makes you look bad as a company. It's not hurtful.
Yeah.
In your business, it's hurtful.
Yeah. It's not putting you out of business. Yeah. Look, I think, as you point out, I don't want to turn this into an ad for my company, but we do deploy private AI, the latest models, even for very small companies. So there is a solution out there. Thank God. Let's shift gears to the last section, the lightning rounds. So George, I'm going to mention a few things to you, a few items, and I want you to tell me if you think they're underrated or overrated, and then maybe a sentence or two why. So
this is the Kahneman fast thinking.
Exactly. This is fast thinking. Which for these things you're going to understand why. So we're gonna kick it off with tacos on the East Coast of the U.S., underrated or overrated?
I would have to say overrated.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there are, when you eat a good taco somewhere, West Coast, and then you go back,
it's tough. It's just sad.
It's tough.
I'm with you on that. AI for your call center, customer service, underrated or overrated?
I would say overrated now, underrated for the future.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, and I should have differentiated there. I think there's AI tools to kind of help the human customer service person. Today, very small percentage, but growing, is full AI voice customer service, which, hey, it's coming. And if you thought voicemail was bad, just wait for the first generation of those. That's going to be not fun. Next is Harvard getting a Harvard Business School MBA, underrated or overrated?
I would say they're underrated just from the sense that it's a huge network and it opens a lot of doors. Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily say that, when you mentioned earlier that you took a Harvard course in accounting, I was going to say at the time, that was the hardest course. I mean, learning accounting through case studies. Oh my Lord. Like, why?
Yeah.
Like literally why?
Yeah.
But so I think on the education side, there's really no difference between being there and being anywhere else. It's really the network and the doors that get opened.
Yeah, exactly. Local marketing strategies, underrated or overrated?
Underrated, I would say. Every local business exists in its own very small competitive environment. And I would say most large organizations that have local businesses do a terrible job of thinking about each location as a business in its own micro competitive system. And that's why most lose against high performing small businesses.
Yeah.
Because they focus on local marketing strategy and they'll beat the big ones every time.
Yeah. It's a great point. I think there are a couple of exceptions out there. I think a great exception is Trader Joe's, where they very aggressively keep the number of products, or SKUs as people like to call them, in each store down to like 500 or 600 SKUs. And it's basically, if people are buying it, it stays on the shelf. If people aren't buying it, we replace it with something else. That's it, right? But I think that's rare. And most, if you go to a Crate and Barrel or whatever, it's going to be the same stuff everywhere, right? Like, and I agree, like not customizing that or having a local marketing strategy could make it tougher for that business. How about CEOs needing to be AI fluent today? Underrated or overrated? Meaning AI fluency for a CEO.
I would say that's underrated. I mean, I was a CEO and I spend all my time with AI now. And given my background, I think about all the ways that if I had had it, I could have applied it, and the importance of kind of putting that front and center and being prepared for the future. I doubt most middle market CEOs have the time, the luxury of the time to think about that. And as it evolves, it will be harder and harder to catch up.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're not thinking about being an AI first organization right now, you're going to have a problem a year or 3 years from now. And at this point, the other very interesting thing is there are many very forward thinking founders and CEOs that are starting, like, the first, AI native bank and the first AI native, whatever you want to call it, right? And those are just going to have huge advantages because you're not starting with, I got 10,000 people. What am I going to do? Right? You're designing something from scratch where AI can do a lot of the jobs and the roles. So it's going to be super interesting over the next couple of years, which is why I also like being in AI. So next is AI regulation, underrated or overrated?
Well, I would say overrated because I don't feel the impact of it.
Yeah, not there yet.
Right? I mean, it's not really having an impact on what companies are doing. So should it be there? Absolutely. Is it effectively there? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
Only in Europe, really, where the EU AI Act is in force. If you're doing high risk AI, the regulators are all over you. How about retiring to Florida? I'm sure you've got some friends retired to Florida. Underrated or overrated?
Overrated.
Yeah, we're down that.
100%.
My wife also agrees with you. Conferences and events in New York City, underrated or overrated?
I have no idea. I haven't been one to one in forever.
All right, well, time to come back. Bowling as a hobby, underrated or overrated?
I would say, I would have to say overrated because I haven't done it in a long time and I've done it. So
hopefully the food and drinks are better than the last time you were there. And then, although there are some kind of hip new bowling alleys in New York City, just to be clear. And finally, the movie Casablanca, underrated or overrated?
Well, definitely underrated. It's one of the greats.
Yeah.
And, it's one of those movies that no matter how many times you've seen it when you see it flash on, oh, they've got Casablanca, you always watch it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And you wouldn't say that for very many movies.
Yeah, I agree with you. Anyway, George, thanks for coming on the show. This has been George Swetlitz, co-founder of RightResponse AI. That was a lot of fun. Thank you, George.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. Great talking to you, Alec.
You are listening to the AI Risk Reward podcast with your host, Alec Crawford. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, for example, Apple Podcasts. Production and sound engineering by Troutman Street Audio. You can find them on LinkedIn. Please like, subscribe, and comment.